Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look for the astrology of November, I almost said December, November 14th through 20th, 2022. Good Lord. Don't know what day it is apparently. So let's talk eclipse season. So this week we are coming to the end of Scorpio season. It is the last week of Scorpio season, and just the way that the sun in Scorpio aligned with the new moon in Scorpio on October 25th, it also means that we are wrapping up the eclipse season. Typically, eclipse season exists within the lunar month that it falls within. So we had that new moon solar eclipse on October 25th, and we had the full moon lunar eclipse just last week on November 8th. I know, it's like, feels like a million years ago, but yeah, we just had an eclipse. How are you all doing? And if you are watching live, per usual, always fun to let me know where you are watching from. We are a global audience, and my Sag rising just loves to travel vicariously through each and every one of you. And so every week we gather live to look at the astrology, and you hear me say over and over again that the astrology is 50% and you are the other 50%. Astrology is just a framework. It's time. Time doesn't tell me how you live it. Time doesn't tell me that you're hungry or whatever. So that's the part where we have to show up and we have to work on ourselves so that we can live this time in the best way possible. But that was the thing about eclipse season, is that 50% part, it's a little bit of a tighter fit. Because eclipses talk about things that are bigger than us. Just like I cannot control the weather, I cannot control the fact that that was a solar eclipse on the 25th of October, or there was a lunar eclipse on the 8th of November. It's just sort of witnessing that there are these moments in time that are bigger than us, and they may be activating certain things in your astrology. And something that I think a lot about as a Scorpio myself, and as a fixed sign, and having a lot of planets in fixed signs and also immutable signs. But I think one of the hardest things over the past few years, if you are a fixed sign, is that the things that have anchored us as a fixed sign, and even if you're like, no, but Katie, I'm not a fixed sign, you have fixed signs somewhere in your astrology. The things that have really anchored us over the, probably for most of our lives, it's like, oh, this is always here. Well, over the last few years, that's moved, and it's a little disorienting. That's why I'm just like, how is it November? How is it my birthday? I don't know how. But I think that sense of like what anchors us in time is just it's moved over the past few years, and even during this eclipse season. So I think this is a good week to take stock. What changed, who entered our lives, who exited our lives. The thing about eclipses is it can bring people in and out of our lives. And maybe for some of you, the past few weeks have been a pivot point. And this is the other thing about eclipses, is that they plant a seed. That energy of change and transformation will get activated already, or was activated back in October. I know, it's crazy. It'll get activated when there's a planet around that degree over the next days, weeks, months, as we all prepare for the next eclipse season of April and May of 2023. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So yeah, we're coming off of eclipse season. A lot of things have shifted and moved. How are you all doing? It's always, like I said, good to take stock. And I think this week, and we'll go into this a little bit more in a moment, but there's a lot of Neptune aspects. There's actually some really nice trines. It's like we've made it through the gauntlet, and the universe is giving us Venus trine Neptune. It's giving us Sun trine Neptune today, Monday, November 14th. And that's all in advance of, leaving behind Scorpio and some of these very difficult lessons that come with the sign, and then to step into Sagittarius season later this week on November 20th. But just to reintroduce myself, my name is Katie Sweetman, and like I said, we gather live every week to look at the astrology, and I am both an astrologer and a psychic medium located here in the New York City area. It's another thing as a fixed sign. Like, I was in Brooklyn for 16 years. Yesterday would have been my 18-year New York anniversary, but I am very close. I can see the Hudson from my apartment. I can see Manhattan from my apartment. So we're not that far, but yeah, I never thought I'd move across the river, but here we are. So yeah, I'm in the New York City area, and I know a lot of you like to watch live, and even those that don't watch live, and some of you listen the next day and you say, Katie, I feel like I know you. Yeah, well, here on my side, it's always, I see the people in the live chat. So that's why it's good to hear from you all. How are you doing? What this is opening up for you? What's twisting and turning and shifting? And I say this as a Scorpio, it's not an easy sign, but it's an archetype. And it's an archetype that we all have to travel through and meet, whether it is Scorpio season or whether there's an eclipse in Scorpio. There was a lunar eclipse in Scorpio back in May 16th earlier this year, or even when the moon is in Scorpio. And this week we actually have 3 planets leaving Scorpio, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, and going into Sagittarius. So we're going to talk a little bit in a moment what Sagittarius is, and I think even next week we're going to come back to this point. But let's look at the astrology of November 14th through 20th, 2022. So as we start this week, we have the Scorpio sun. It's a water sign. And we have Neptune. We have Neptune in Pisces. Pisces is also a water sign. And this is actually something that I've been talking a lot with my Saturn Masterclass, which we are actually starting to wrap up. It's been a 12-week class with a group cohort of my first students. But water is such an important element. It is the element, and there are 4 elements in the astrological system. There is fire, earth, air, water. I have to think about it for a second. These elements are crucial. They talk about the building blocks of our lives, but water, I think, is really undervalued because on a sort of an engineering level, it's the glue, it's the bind. It takes us out of air, which is very mind and mental, and it allows for movement, emotional connection. So Scorpio speaks to the experiences that can really powerfully move us. What does that even mean? Well, what happens when somebody dies? And maybe that's somebody that you know, or maybe it's even, being in witness of somebody who has passed, in that sense of what effect does it have on you? Or even these other moments in our lives that are pretty intense, and the effect that it has on us emotionally. It can move us, it can pick us up and put us someplace else, and we are like, where the heck am I? And that's the power of water. And it can be both this force that can be profoundly moving, disorienting, it pushes and pulls at us, but at the same time, water is this element that allows us to change and grow and transform. Because in the example of Scorpio, which is the second water sign, you need that water in order to really grow and evolve on a deeper emotional level. If you are never tested by life, if you never go through anything that's remotely difficult, how do you grow and transform? And that's, I think, something that we need to take stock of as we come to the end of Scorpio season, is to what's the alchemy been the past 4 weeks? Where have we moved? Maybe you literally moved in the past few weeks. What has moved internally? How have you learned to be more emotionally aware or vulnerable? Or where have themes of intimacy and deeper even sexuality have come into your experiences the last few weeks? But there is that darker side to Scorpio. Just like any sign in the zodiac, there is that darker side. And the dark side of Scorpio is pretty flippin' dark, because it can talk about these very not so nice parts of being a human being on this planet: abuse, shame, trauma. And so this is a season that can sometimes push at these deeper buttons. But the emotional alchemy of this time, and this is what really brings us into Sagittarius season, is that emotional experience that we have, and sometimes the soul searching that we go through, brings us to Sag, which is the light. how do we get wisdom and knowledge that Sagittarius is so famous for? First, we have to go through Scorpio. It's unavoidable. So this is where we are starting to come out of the tunnel this week and opening up to the light of Sag. And as we're doing this, and I always think of what's called the hero's journey. If you Google the hero's journey, there's actual visuals and graphics, and it comes from Joseph Campbell. The Hero with 1,000 Faces, I think, is the name of the book. But this idea, this monomyth that is present everywhere in humanity, that there's the hero, it goes on a journey and it's tested. And it goes through that sort of dark passage, and then it comes out. Well, it's very much like Scorpio going into Sagittarius. We have been tested. Our faith has been perhaps rocked, or maybe our faith is strong. And now we need to go into Sagittarius and try to make sense of some of the things that we've been through. Not just this season, but maybe even the past year, past few years. Certainly it's been a very interesting past few years. So as the sun starts to leave Scorpio, it picks up on a trine to Neptune. And Neptune in its highest facet can be redemption, unconditional love. Yes, we're at the part of the story where maybe we get a happy ending. Maybe there's a silver lining. Maybe there's a little, gold at the end of the rainbow. And sometimes Neptune can speak to illusions, but it does talk as an evolutionary planet about doing our spiritual work. To do our spiritual work is to work to release the negative ego, to refine something, to find peace. And maybe that's the best thing that can come out of Sun trine Neptune or even Scorpio season, is that even in the midst of everything, we can find the peace within us. The sign that's before Scorpio is Libra. And we can kind of go back and forth in the zodiac, FYI. And it reminds us that Scorpio needs to find that balance point between the two sides, whether it's the lightest of the light or the darkest of the dark, and to have that inner peace within. I realize it's not so easy, but that's the idea. So we have Sun trine Neptune, and then on Tuesday, November 15th, we have Venus. Venus makes a trine to Jupiter. I love a good Venus trine Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter, these are what are called the greater benefics in astrology from a traditional perspective. And Jupiter, there is a little bit of this mentality in astrology that Jupiter is like Santa Claus. Everything works out. So I never like to overpromise Jupiter, because Jupiter can take something and make it bigger, and sometimes make the things you don't want to be bigger. But Venus and Jupiter, it's about the pleasure of life. It's about enjoying, maybe good fortune, however you want to define that. But the trine is happening in water. So this is about this emotional connection, emotional openness, open-heartedness, generosity to other people, a sense of recognition with other people. And that brings us into Wednesday, November 16th, when Venus arrives in Sagittarius. So we are now starting to have a shift in the astrological weather. The first planet to go into Sagittarius is Venus. Now, if Venus in Scorpio, where it's been since October, can be a little bit possessive and jealous. So that's the shadow side of Venus in Scorpio, the seductress, for example. But Venus in Scorpio is so much about, we have this connection, we have this trust, we have this bond, it's unbreakable. Well, Venus in Sagittarius, Venus needs a lot of space in Sagittarius. It typically does not want to be tied down. Relationships, they need a sense of philosophy. They're sort of built on an ideal, or connecting with people who are intelligent, have a lot of wisdom and knowledge. Venus, as this planet of value and worth and currency, says that what's valuable? Well, knowledge is valuable. Education is valuable. And Venus in Sagittarius can be a little bit bohemian. It wants to sort of travel. It doesn't necessarily want to be rooted and stable. It's a mutable sign, after all. Mutable signs do like a lot of wiggle room. Then we get to Thursday, November 17th, and Mercury goes into Sagittarius. That's our second planet to change signs this week. Now, Mercury is traditionally not at home in Sagittarius. We'd say in astrology that's debilitated. However, Mercury, as the planet of voice and communication, works its way through Sagittarius, which brings a lot of wisdom and knowledge to Mercury. Here's the thing about Mercury and Sagittarius. It has a lot of opinions and sometimes can shoot its mouth off, especially with Mars and Gemini. And we need to be careful about, maybe the things that are leaving our mouth over the next couple of weeks. Is this what we, want to say? Is this what we mean? With Mars retrograde, Mars will be retrograde until January 12th, 2023. We have to look at our impulses. We have to be present with the choices that we're making and be very aware about how our voice and how our choices are impacting other people. That said, Mercury in Sagittarius, it favors debates, convictions, truth, wisdom, knowledge, exploration. It's a smarty pants. Mercury, publishing, getting our ideas out. Just make sure that you're not dying on that hill, so to speak, that one hill that we will go to our death for. But that's the thing, like there's that shadow side of Sagittarius, which is fundamentalism. So it's sort of this reminder that as we go, through any season, to look at both the light and dark of the sign. But the shadow side of Sagittarius is that my truth, capital T truth, is the truth. But as we learned over the past few years, when we had that South Node in Sagittarius, we just need to be like, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to see things from a different perspective this season. I think that's the highest way we can use Sagittarius is to remain curious. And even as we search the world or, focus on our education or educate ourselves, that we remain curious. That's the balance with Sag and Gemini, is to remain curious. Then we get to, I gotta look at my notes, we get to this weekend. So this weekend, the sun is wrapping up its time in Scorpio. And on Saturday, the sun reaches the very end of Scorpio. When we hit the end of a sign, there is typically that what have you learned? And I'm just highlighting this because we have come out of eclipse season. We're stepping out of a lunar month that began with the solar eclipse in Scorpio. What have you learned? Maybe it's a little premature. And to be fair, the solar eclipse in Scorpio opened up a period of time that is 6 months long. It takes us all the way to the next solar eclipse on April 20th of 2023. So we're in this larger arc of time that's about Scorpio, looking at the things that we hold on to emotionally, that take up emotional real estate, that need to be eliminated, to allow a process of death and decay. I realize that's a very strong word to say, but I am a Scorpio. To allow a process of death and decay so that something new can come in, and that the other side of the eclipses, which is Taurus, we had that lunar eclipse in Taurus, which is about bringing in new things, the fertility of life, the pleasure of life, being incarnated in our physical bodies as opposed to the corpse. I realize another strong word with Scorpio. And Scorpio just talks, and especially with Scorpio Taurus, about that balance between life and death. So maybe we've got some intense emotions coming up as we say goodbye to Scorpio season, but then the sun arrives in Sagittarius on November 20th, Sunday, November 20th. Right before it does that, it makes a trine. There's another trine. Trines typically are supportive. They sort of smooth over the edges. They open up opportunities. We have a trine to Jupiter. And so maybe we, are feeling a bit optimistic. That's the thing about Jupiter trines, and maybe even Jupiter in any aspect. We feel optimistic. Hey, maybe it's all going to work out. I sure hope so. I'm sure it's going to work out, right? Right. So we have this supportive trine to Jupiter, and so maybe it's a weekend where we are searching our souls. We are looking at philosophy, asking ourselves these deeper questions. What does it all mean? And then the sun arrives in Sagittarius. So just a quick little, of course, happy birthday, Sagittarius, if you're born on the 20th. Sagittarius is a fire sign. That is the last fire sign. So here we are. We've gone through, we start the astrological year with Aries. We did that back on the equinox. I think that was either 19th or 20th of April. And we've gone all the way through 2 of the quadrants of the zodiac. Now we've entered the last quadrant. The last quadrant is Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. Then that wraps up the astrological year in March, but we're not there yet. When we go into the last quadrant, it's not about the personal. It's about the collective. It's about what is beyond us. And so Sag, it's, from a very traditional way of looking at it, it is law, it's higher education, it's the journey, the quest, searching for something out in the world. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Sagittarius and Pisces are actually both ruled by Jupiter. They're two halves of a whole. With Jupiter as the ruler of Sagittarius, wisdom and knowledge, Jupiter, comes from outside of us. I know this because I went to university. I got the degree. I have a PhD. I know this because I went to this country, or I lived through this experience with bringing in the emotional component with Scorpio. There is that external wisdom and knowledge that helps us to understand the world and understand our place in the world. There's a sense of convictions and truth and right and wrong, and maybe even morality. I realize that's a heavy word, but morality connects us to the archetype of Sagittarius as well. But then there's the other side, which is about truth and truth discovered within. And that's what when we get to Pisces season, maybe even with Jupiter still in Pisces, it'll be in Pisces until December 28th. This is both a season to find wisdom and knowledge outside of us, but also to find it within. If you've ever experienced something, it can even be something as simple as a dream or a knowing or just this sort of intuitive flash, and you know something, like you know your own name and you know that you have to do something. And somebody's like, what do you mean? Like, where's that coming from? And sometimes the things that make sense on paper don't make sense for us. And so that's that duality where there's the wisdom of the world and the wisdom of how we should be doing things with Sagittarius. But then what is true for us? What is the truth that we're discovering inside of ourselves with Jupiter at the very end of Pisces? And this is the truth that we find through interfaith, meditation, reflection, retreat, and even mysticism and spirituality. Spirituality being the beating heart of religion, Sagittarius, the other side of the coin. We'll talk more about this next week when we really truly go into Sagittarius season. So sort of put a little pin in this. Let's go through the astrology of this week of November 14th through 20th, 2022 for each of the 12 signs. Just your friendly reminder to also listen for your rising sign. Yes, both your sun sign and your rising sign, and get 2 bits of information unless you're born at sunrise, and then your sun sign and your rising sign is the same. Anyway, so let's start with Aries. Aries, so Mars, just your friendly reminder that Mars continues to be retrograde, and Mars is your planet. So Mars right now has been in this sort of back and forth square with Neptune. And Mars, by the way, is in Gemini. It'll be in Gemini until March 25th of 2023. That's a long time for your planet to be in one sign. And it's so much right now about education. How are you being educated? What are you reading? How are you speaking? How are you communicating? What are you choosing? And there is at the root of this time a need to gather a lot of information, Aries, so that you can make a bigger decision, I think, when you get into March of next year. But this is the fact-finding time of Mars's time going through Gemini, but it's making the square to Neptune. And so this is a time where you have to sort of feel into the tension between the choices that you are making and maybe the choices that are, the choices that are more aligned with either your higher self or the divine, whatever you want to believe in. And sometimes we want things, Mars is desire, it's action. We want things that are not always the best for us. And so there is this back and forth square that's happening with Neptune, and this need to surrender, find compassion for yourself, find compassion for other people, to do that inner spiritual work and to do a spiritual work around how you use your Mars, which is how you lead, how you take action, how you take power. Sometimes how you take power over people, or sometimes how you make choices for other people. That's a little bit complicated. Only make choices for yourself, ideally. So that's one of these little things that's happening. And of course, we're wrapping up a Scorpio season. And Scorpio season for you, Aries, has been your time where you've had to do the deep inner work. And maybe that's been the play where something's been revealed to you over the past few weeks. Yes, it is about, how you use your Mars, but what is the deeper and hidden motivations? So the whole thing about Scorpio is that it always will show you the deeper motivations. That said, we've got some nice energies with Venus trine Jupiter. It's beautiful for relationships and connections, so use that time well. Oh my God, it's like Taurus, like what comes after Aries? I completely blanked. So Taurus, we are wrapping up eclipse season, Taurus, and so this is a good time to take stock, to make sure that everything is still attached, that nothing left. Taurus, and I know I've been saying this, it's one of the hardest things about some of this astrology is that the things that you thought were rock solid and would never change have been changing, or the goalpost has moved, or you have moved. It can be a little bit disorienting, but at the root of this energy is to really get you to grow and evolve. And Taurus, and this is just sort of, it's typical for your sign, it's like you want things to stay the same. That's how life stays stable and grounded, which is a beautiful energy. It's how life flourishes, but that's not the time that you're in. So this season may have been a bit of a twist and turn. Scorpio season for you is about relationships. So this is coming out of a eclipse cycle that's about new beginnings and relationships. People coming into your life, people maybe even leaving your life. We'll have to see, Taurus. But that said, maybe you've seen some big changes in your direction, your career. That said, we've got Scorpio seasons wrapping up with that nice trine to Neptune, and maybe that's helping you to smooth out some disagreements with friends, or disagreements in your community, or maybe even just making sure you and another person are on the same page about the future. That said, the sun going into Sagittarius, that is going to kick off a season that is opening this time of doing some deeper emotional work. I know that's the thing about Scorpio season, is that the second Scorpio season is over. Then the sun goes into what I like to call your 8th room. And the 8th room is where we have to do our work. We have to face ourselves. We have to be tested by life. I know you're tired, Scorpio, but thankfully you have a beautiful, delicious trine between Venus, your planet, and Jupiter this week. And so maybe that's giving you a little bit of hope and confidence as you go over, and to travel past some of this eclipse energy. But yeah, there you go, Taurus. Gemini. So Mercury, your planet, it's been in Scorpio, and Scorpio for you is so much about health, wellness, projects, getting things done, a little bit of a workaholic in that part of your chart. And it's made you maybe even a little bit obsessive about the details. So maybe you've been really cleaning things out over the past few weeks. But Mercury, as maybe you heard me say in the introduction, Mercury and then Venus, they're going to leave pretty much together, 16th and 17th of November. And your planet is going to leave on the 17th, and it's going to go into Sagittarius, where it remains until about like the second week of December. And Sagittarius for you is about relationships. So, you're sort of seeing this, gradual shift in the narrative right now. And maybe you need that break because you've been working really hard over the past few weeks, Gemini. So it's about connection, relationships, other people. The sun will go into that part of the sky on Sunday, and then next week, which we will talk about this later, then you're going to have a new moon in your relationship sign, which says that this is a time for new beginnings in relationships, or a time to focus on relationships. That said, the eclipses for you have been shifting and shaking up these themes around health, wellness, how you take care of yourself, your physical health, your spiritual health, your emotional health, and this time to really let go of some things that you need to let go of. I know it's a little bit of a intense eclipse season for you because Mercury, your planet, has been right in the middle of all this eclipse energy. But you got some nice trines between the sun and Jupiter. Jupiter is, by the way, is in your career sign right now. So it did dip back into your career sign. I think it was a couple weeks ago, and it'll be there until, October, it'll be there until December 28th. So really use this time to plan ahead, look towards the future, get some opportunities going in your professional life. Like I said, you have been working hard over the past few weeks. Cancer. So yeah, Cancer, we are coming out of an intense emotional time. You, since you're ruled by the moon, you typically feel this energy a little bit more because it touches on your planet, the moon. That said, Scorpio season for you has been all about the self. How do you express who you are? What makes you you? What is your creativity and your self-expression? And so this new moon period, and even in the solar eclipse going over the next 6 months, this is a time for creative new beginnings, creative projects, children, maybe even the birth of a child or getting pregnant. That said, with that lunar eclipse that we just had in your 11th, you're looking towards the future and trying to figure out what direction you want to take your life in. Definitely, I know after you get out of the 8th room, as I call it, this will be in March, where do you want to go after all this really heavy duty emotional work that you've been doing since 2020? That said, enjoy the nice trine between Venus and Jupiter this week. Venus is one of your angle rulers. It is your planet of home, and maybe this is a time to see some opportunities in your home environment, something with family, and even getting your deeper emotional needs met at this time. Leo, so how you doing? You're one of those signs that's been right in the middle of all this eclipse energy. It's just last week that you had a lunar eclipse in your career sign. Here's the thing, and I was thinking about this because there's a lot of Leos and Leo rising people in power in the news right now. And sometimes that eclipse, even though it's right now, it's already been happening. It happened maybe in October, maybe, in September, October. So it's so much about really taking the next step forward with your professional life. And do keep in mind, Leo, that you are in an arc of time for 7 years. Yes, 7 years, since 2018, 2019 to 2025, 2026, where you need to reinvent your professional life. That means different things to different Leos, but whatever you're doing, Leo, make sure it's what's in your heart and your soul. Leo, you are the sign of passion, joy, creativity, individuality, and it really works against you when you're in a situation that doesn't allow you that space. If you are burnt out, Leo, don't forget, find your passion. I think I did this long Leo pep talk last week. Go back and listen to it. But that said, Scorpio is leading you into Sag season, especially with Venus and Mercury going into Sag. Venus is a career planet for you, so over the next few weeks, especially into that second week of December, it's about projects and sort of doing the detail work in your professional life. And maybe, with some of these bigger changes that have been happening, how do you put a plan into place? How do you get the system running? Maybe life has shook up a little bit. Well, where's the plan? Where's your schedule? Do you need to reorganize your day differently? Sagittarius season for you is also the time to focus on your health and wellness, so always be proactive with that. Virgo, so Mercury is your planet and it's been in Scorpio for the past few weeks. And so Scorpio for you is your what's called third sign. So Mercury has been about investigations, information, research, education, getting obsessive about the details, but maybe even having intense conversations, revealing conversations. Scorpio is about secrets. Maybe you've had some things to say, some things to share. Mercury is going to go this week on the 17th. It's going to go into Sagittarius. And Sagittarius for you, Virgo, is your sign of home and family. So the general sort of course of your personal calendar is now that Mercury is at the bottom of the chart, the next few weeks are about nesting, focusing on your home environment. I realize we're starting, at least from here in America, we're going to have Thanksgiving next week. So it's time to really focus on home and family, and then maybe inviting people into your home, or maybe even connecting to family members or people who are like family in other ways. This is also a time to make sure that you are getting your emotional needs met, or that your household or where you live is supportive of your life. Venus is going to be there too, especially as it's picking up on a nice trine with Jupiter. This is a time for you to really take care of your life, and looking at money and assets, and maybe you're making some investments in yourself this week, or maybe even some purchases. But that said, we'll talk more about home and family next week, Virgo, with that Sagittarius new moon. I believe it's on the 26th, but that's next week. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and it's been in Scorpio the past few weeks. And so it's been a little bit of a tight spot. You know, even though these eclipses aren't about you, your planet has been in the midst of these eclipses. It's been about money, finance, assets, spending. Like, what is of true value for you? Do you value yourself? And so there's been this back and forth, and maybe especially with the lunar eclipse in Taurus last week, it brought up a lot of deep emotional material. Am I safe? Do I have enough? Etc. So Venus leaves Scorpio, and it's a bit of a tone shift for you, because there's been that really heavy energy in Scorpio with the South Node also in Scorpio. And going into Sagittarius, that's fire, you're air, Libra, and so you get that sense of travel, exploration, need to move, need to speak, need to make choices, and to focus on your mind over the next few weeks. And that's why I said, like, education is a priority over the next few weeks, or maybe just reading a lot of books, for example. But at the heart of this time is for you to gather information, for you to sort of start to make sense of what's important, to assign value to things, and to start to shift and move your life around. That said, Libra, with the sun going into Sag as well, it might be a busy time, and don't forget that Mars is up in Gemini, and Gemini is your ninth sign. So you might have a lot to say over the next few weeks, and maybe there's some deeper themes in your life, you know, especially in relationships or other people, about truth, faith, conviction. Like, what do you stand for? What do you believe in? Are you and a partner on the same page? You know, sometimes these things come up between you and another person, or you and an intimate partner. Wow, we don't believe in the same thing. How can we resolve? But that said, it might be a busy time, and you know, maybe a lot more travel and movement over the next few weeks and into December. Scorpio. Happy birthday, Scorpio. I know it's the last week of your season, and I'm just saying this because I get this all the time. Oh, I'm born on a cusp. Just fun fact, there are no such things as cusp. You either are ruled by Mars, Scorpio, or you're ruled by Jupiter, Sagittarius. Okay, soapbox over. So Scorpio, you're coming out of eclipses, but nevertheless, these eclipses are going to be with you for a while. Do keep in mind, Scorpio, that this time last year, November 19th, you had a lunar eclipse in Taurus, your opposing sign. There's so much that it's going back and forth between you and other people. It's so much about relationships right now. New people coming into your life, maybe people leaving your life. At the heart of this time is that you're doing relationship and connection radically different. Hey, Uranus is in your relationship sign. And this is going to continue into the new year. And maybe it's worthwhile, Scorpio, to go back and again, look at November of last year, look at April, May of this year. Do you start to see a common thread? Do you see a common thread when you go back to 2018, 2019 with some of the bigger shifts that began when Uranus went into Taurus? That said, it's, you know, maybe take care of yourself a little bit, Scorpio. It's a lot of psychic energy. And I made this comment last week because it was the weekend before the last video that we did. And the sun made that conjunction to the South Node. I am a Scorpio. And I was like, geez, feels like I'm dying. It's like this really intense energy. So because you are a water sign, Scorpio, because you feel things so deeply, make sure you're taking care of yourself at this time. And maybe this is where that trine to the sun and Jupiter or to Neptune comes in, is maybe that can kind of soothe over some of the frayed edges that came up over the past few weeks with eclipse season. Even, you know, before November, October, September, when we had sort of those early bits of eclipse energy start to come in. That said, Venus is one of your major planets. It rules an angle and it goes into Sagittarius. And so Venus in Sag, is, especially as a relationship planet, is so much about value and worth, and how do you create stability and security with somebody? What is your value and worth to somebody? What's the sort of that currency that your relationships run on? But maybe, with everything that's happened with the eclipses, Venus and Sag wants everything to start to consolidate and start to come together. Sagittarius. Hey, it's almost your birthday, Sagittarius. So if you're born at the beginning of the sign, happy birthday. We'll talk more about this next week. Scorpio for you is what's called the end of your personal zodiac. It forms what's called the 12th sign. So every month before your birthday season, it's time to go within. It's time to reflect. Scorpio, or rather the 12th sign of any of the zodiac signs, sometimes is an area that can be hidden from us. And especially with that solar eclipse that you had in Scorpio on October 25th, and over the next 6 months and even over this past season, really getting into your blind spots, the things that you don't typically look about yourself. Another way of looking at it, Sagittarius, is these looking into spirituality, meditation, reflection, and even on a larger level, how is, or now and even into the next 6 months, it's time to let things go. All of this is in preparation of something greater. That said, Sun is going into Sag, but before it does, you've got these planets that are going to start to go into Sagittarius. So Venus goes into Sagittarius, and with Venus and Sagittarius, and Venus being the ruler of your health and wellness, as you start to make these new beginnings in advance of your birthday, maybe this is a birthday season where you also have to look at, well, what's my health? How do I take care of my body? Do I need to make some changes? And maybe with Venus in that part of your chart, you're looking ahead to this new personal year and you're like, okay, I need to make some positive changes in my life. And Venus, of course, is supportive of that, but it's in a place in the chart that does talk about vitality, but it also talks about new beginnings in advance of your birthday. Mercury is also going to go into Sagittarius on the 17th. Mercury for you is a relationship planet. So maybe there is a turn in a relationship or a new season with somebody. It's a new beginning. It's time to take action and go forward. That said, Sagittarius season is going to play off of Mars and Gemini. So it's not going to be a quiet birthday season. And there's going to be a lot of things about relationships and other people and sort of these back and forth. And it's going to bring to a head some of these Mars retrograde themes that we are working on, especially in relationships, into January. Then the Sun arrives in Sagittarius on November 20th, right before making a trine to Jupiter, your planet, which is at the very end of Pisces right now. You're wrapping up something about home and family. Where is home? Who is home? All in preparation of Jupiter's re-entry into Aries on December 28th. Capricorn. So, as you hear me say every week, Saturn is your planet. Saturn continues to be in Aquarius. Yes, Saturn spends 3 years in a sign, so you have these longer arcs compared to other signs. You could be ruled by Mercury, and Mercury will zip in and out of a zodiac sign, and sometimes as fast as 2 weeks, but your planet Saturn has a longer orbit. So it's like your sense of time and how time unfolds in your life is different. That said, you're starting to come to an end of a 3-year chapter. Yes, you have it until March. So what is that, 4 months? Until Saturn, your planet, changes signs on March 7th. But in the meantime, it continues to be about material stability, material security, really, building up your physical life, planting roots, making purchases, making investments, but also some of these deeper themes about value and worth and even self-worth. That said, Scorpio season for you is about community, friends, social circles, social issues, social causes, and how this eclipse has put an emphasis, a spotlight, or even changed something in your social circle, or even how you looked at your future. Then you have that lunar eclipse last week in that sign of self-expression, creativity, and sort of that dynamic push and pull that happens between you as an individual, but also you as part of the greater whole and the group. That said, Sun and also Venus, and Venus for you is a career planet, and Mercury going into Sagittarius, it's preparing you for your season that begins at the end of December. So this is sort of your winding down of this personal year, and not pushing too hard, getting quiet, reflecting with Jupiter. And in the very end of Pisces, there is this link between voice and communication, but also the intuitive voice, and sort of being able to connect to something that is typically hidden. Maybe pay attention to your dreams over the next few weeks. But I'm surely will have some more things to talk about next week with the Sagittarius new moon. Aquarius, my final fixed sign. Just checking in with Aquarius. I feel like it's a little harder for Aquarius because you've had that lunar eclipse and Uranus in your fourth, and that's the base of your astrology chart. That's like somebody shaking up your foundation, but it's put so much emphasis on home and family, changes in the household, maybe a move, people moving in, people moving out, but also needing to come back to self and to come back in yourself. And sort of these larger themes about where is home and who is home, and even sometimes where is home, making sure that that's within yourself. Then you had Saturn continues. Saturn is your planet, continues to be in your sign. It'll be in Aquarius until March 7th of 2023. That's 3 years in total. It's been about new beginnings and really having to take renewed responsibility in your life. Sometimes Aquarius feeling like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, unfortunately. It's been a little bit of a rough go for some Aquariuses, so it's just this friendly reminder to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, Aquarius. What happens before Leo? I'm sorry, I'm just doing some quick math, especially with these lunar eclipses. They do pick up on the moon. The moon is your sign of health and wellness, so just make sure you're taking care of your health and wellness. That said, Scorpio season pulls you out of the part of the chart that talks about career, your place in the world, sort of your professional roles and duties and responsibilities, and it starts to pull you into something called the 11th. Now you're starting to come to the end of your personal year, and it's about looking ahead, looking outwardly beyond the horizon. Where do you want to go? And after your birthday or this next coming personal year, what are your goals? What are your hopes and wishes? The sense of community and friendship and your connection to the greater whole, and maybe even sometimes feeling like you need more friends, you need more community at this time. But with Venus going there, Venus for you is the sign of home and family, and maybe you're reaching towards friends for that emotional port, or friends who are like family. Mercury goes into that part of the chart, and then the Sun goes into the 11th on the 20th. So it's about really opening up your eyes and sort of seeing into the future. I don't mean that necessarily clairvoyantly see into the future, but that sense of being able to perceive where things are going. I think that's one of Aquarius's Aquarius's skills, is to really anticipate the future, because you are a very future-oriented sign. But that said, enjoy some beautiful trines between Venus and Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter are Venus for you is your sign of home and family, and maybe after all the ups and downs, there's hopefully a little silver lining in everything. Finally, Pisces. So Pisces, my last sign. You weren't getting it like some of the other signs the past few weeks. That said, Scorpio season for you has been about these larger themes of philosophy, truth, faith, meaning. What do I believe in? What do I stand for? With the solar eclipse energy, this is so much about it's not the mind, and I think sometimes it's hard to really conceptualize the ninth sign or the ninth house in astrology, because it's our place in the world. It's our view of the world, how we interact with the world, how we are educated about the world. And sometimes where we can get stuck in our blinders about what we think the world should be or what we believe in, what we think is true, and maybe needing to open up our mind a little bit more. That said, with the recent lunar eclipse in your third, it's about new perspectives and not forgetting to stay curious, Pisces. But there is this larger theme about voice, and as the sun leaves Scorpio, it goes into your 10th sign. And you enter the part of your personal calendar where the sun has reached the highest point in the sky, the highest point in your astrology chart. It's about your career, it's about your ambitions, your public face, the duties and responsibilities that you do on a professional level. It's a season to get ambitious. And I realize that Sag season sort of typically coincides with the end of the year. It's not typically when people are really interested in the professional world, we're interested in Christmas parties or holiday parties. But that said, this is your time, especially with the new moon next week in Sagittarius, but Venus is going to be there giving you a professional boost. Maybe that's good for networking and connection, getting your voice out there, sharing some writing, sharing something about truth and meaning and conviction. Mercury is going to be there again with the voice. So you've got a lot to say right now, Pisces. Jupiter, especially because Jupiter is back in your sign. And so we can't forget that even though you're Pisces, and so I think sometimes from a pop culture standpoint, we think Pisces is sometimes this little quiet church mouse, but no, Pisces is one of the signs of faith. And how do you really inspire people and to illuminate things and help to show the way for people? So there you go. That is your look at the astrology of November 14th through 20th, 2022. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this has been Empowering Astrology. You can find me online at empoweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, I'm on Spotify, YouTube, yeah, I know a lot of you watch this on different platforms. Like, Katie, I watch this when I'm at the gym, like, hi. But anyway, it's always lovely to see you all, to see some familiar faces in the live chat. We made it out of eclipse season. This was an Instagram story where my dad texted me and he's like, I made it through the eclipse. And I'm like, that's a win, Dad. We all made it. So anyway, have a wonderful week. Always, again, good to see you. You can always sign up for my newsletter. I put out a newsletter every first thing Monday morning so you can get a jump start on the week. Also, book a consultation with me. I know a lot of you are my clients. So until next week in Sagittarius season, take care and be well. Bye.